And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life. And I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And at 8, The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And at 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a springlocking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have springlocks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original Springlock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a Springlock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible Springlocking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple, since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the Springlock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birth in hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because, like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions.
Number 5. Yellow Suit. In FNAF 2 on Night 6, Phone Guy's call reveals that he is surprised you came into work at the location, as it is meant to be shut down for a while. He tells you that there was an incident that happened involving the yellow suit in the back, which many have theorized to be the Springlock suit used in the missing children incident, where 5 victims went missing. Some even think that this phone call is referring to that incident. Phone Guy claims that someone wore the yellow suit, and ever since, the animatronics have been acting strangely. Is it because they had victims stuffed into them, and possibly because those victims' souls are making the animatronics behave more aggressively because they're possessing them? I don't know, but it makes sense.
And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figured was a Springlock suit, that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? And ultimately, in at number 2, Missing Children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since 1 knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't like snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me. Finally, in at number 1, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is going to be controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates in my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram, not asking about my game's Kickstarter, but rather the bite of 83 and how it had to have been a spring locking bothers me to my core. I say this every time I'm bringing it up. I don't think that this was a spring lock failure. That being said, it's still possible, and that's what this list is about. The reason I don't think it was a spring lock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no spring locks would have a chance of failing. Since, keep in mind, a spring lock failure refers to the spring lock mechanism failing to stay open, meaning it snaps back into animatronic mode. That's why it's bad if someone is inside, and there would be no spring lock mechanism in and around the mouth because it would always be in animatronic mode, since the jaw just moves up and down. But nevertheless, it's still a possibility, since logic and physics doesn't seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're electromagnet, they would still be open with power, so if they ran out of power, they would end up closing. Just saying. And at 10, William Afton. Again, could William have suffered a spring lock failure before getting trapped in the spring Bonnie suit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the spring lock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the spring lock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons. With his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby, his death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the springlock failure, or something having to do with springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNAF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNAF 6, so maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was.
Number 7. Kelsey is Crying Child / Cassidy. While Kelsey being Andrew could make some sense, others have speculated that the corpse found inside the suit actually belongs to Cece, Crying Child. This is obviously because of the physical description of the corpse, which has curly black hair. A lot of people coming back to that curly black hair for a lot of these theories. This description matches the appearance of Crying Child, who also appears to have black and curly or wavy hair based on what we see in the games. But Kelsey is blonde. How does he fit in? Well, it is possible that Kelsey is the amalgamated manifestation of both Crying Child and Cassidy, who perhaps both haunt Golden Freddy if in this continuity they were both victims and have decided to share possession of the animatronic. Neither of them of course was blonde, but they could be changing their appearance together, using a disguise to go out in the world and trick bullies into trusting them. Cassidy could also possibly be considered the more aggressive personality, while Crying Child could be considered the nicer side, and also might bring the masculine appearance to the table when it comes to their disguise. because obviously Cassidy was a girl, so yeah.
And at 6, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the Springlocks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended, because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the Bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a Springlock victim. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms that hold back all the robotic parts in the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow Animatronics came from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. And while there are holes in this theory, there is potential that this is the case. So the Shadow Animatronics are possible Springlock victims. I'm gonna have to keep saying that because people in the comments are gonna get mad. It's like, oh, they weren't Springlock. They could have been. It's possible. And that's the list, okay? And at 4, Golden Call. As a human when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even like fully like a flesh, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it.
Number 3, Funtime Bonnie is a Springlock suit. Funtime Bonnie really only appears in Sister Location as an empty head. But what if there is something else going on with this animatronic? After all, there is one animatronic who we also don't get a good look at in the game, but who we are pretty familiar with by the end of it, just based on our experiences. That would be the Springlock animatronic that we are stuck in temporarily. While we never see it explicitly, we also never get to see Funtime Bonnie explicitly either. This has led some to theorize that Funtime Bonnie is said Springlock suit and is the older animatronic that Circus Baby was referring to. The only thing that seems odd is how new we'd imagine Funtime Bonnie to look, but then again, it's more likely that the animatronics at Sister Location are actually really old and have just been well maintained and possibly refurbished, and possibly, you know, hidden away there. After all, Circus Baby's Pizza World seems to be one of the first locations, I think. This timeline is hard to keep track of, so forgive me if I'm wrong about something that has not actually been confirmed. So I guess we can't really be wrong about much.
Penultimately, and at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his Spring Bonnie suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the Springlocks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years, and that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by FNAF on Game Jolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. And at 10, working at Freddy's. Working at Freddy's would suck. Like, if we're in so much danger, why are we staying for the 5 nights? Okay, do we need a job that bad? Putting like the lore reasons aside, right? But the real question is, other than that, how is Fazbear Entertainment even allowed to have employees in an environment like this? Already working there, you would have to deal with the possibility of a Springlock failure, and Henry and William just letting the people who run your business and making them money wear the suits is stupid, okay? Like, put this on or you're fired, but don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing your internal organs in the hot suits that fail with moisture. Like, seriously? Want to talk about health and safety? What about the having actual corpses stuffed into animatronic suits that are in front of how many kids every single day? Especially when one of them is known for loving pizza and in the VR game is shown in her FNAF 1 form to actually be shoving pizza into the various joints of her body. Plus, 5 nights of animatronics trying to kill me? Yeah, no thanks, okay? I'm glad you fired me at the end of it, but honestly, I'd have quit as soon as, like, the first phone call ended. No thanks. Phone guy's like, oh, they might move? No, I'm done. In at 9, Scooped. Now, I know you may be mad and think that this is a stupid point, but hear me out, okay? The Scooper may seem like a weird but normal thing, at least by FNAF standards at first, but with the blueprint revealing how this thing actually works, it's an incredible piece of technology that is far worse than a Springlock suit. It can inject whatever it ends up scooping with Remnant, which is a molten metal possessed by souls, and assuming that my theory about Michael being a robot was wrong, keeping a person alive after removing their insides. It's capable of doing that, replacing their parts with robot parts, and then having those robotic parts leave the body but still have the person be alive. In essence, it makes that person just a walking case of flesh that is still somehow able to stand up on its own. Unless it didn't actually remove anything and it just like opened him up, but then again, it would still require some serious juice to keep him alive after that. That's pretty damn impressive, and it's also terrifying. I'd rather have the instant death of a Springlock suit than having my bones replaced with robotic ones. Yeah, no thanks. At least while I'm awake. Replace my bones with metal ones when I'm asleep, so I can just like... In at 8, Grabbed. Elizabeth Afton getting grabbed by Baby is one of the most terrifying moments in the series. Possibly because Crying Child saw it, which would explain the stomach mouths on the nightmare animatronics. However, if we were to like see this from Crying Child's perspective, whether that detail is canon or not, if we saw it from his perspective, oh my freaking god, that would be so utterly terrifying. I would stand still. I wouldn't know what to do. okay? How do you explain why a kid is like hiding in the bushes while his sister is getting grabbed by an animatronic claw? Okay, you don't. She was just trying to get ice cream. It's horrible. It's shocking. God, especially considering that Elizabeth ends up turning into an absolute psychopath after this, okay? Like, Elizabeth is nuts. But still, like, I don't know. It's that thought of just watching someone get grabbed. Like, sure, maybe for Elizabeth it wasn't that bad because, you know, she kind of was crazy apparently. But still, like, watching it happen, that's just f***ed up. That's a horrible thing to watch happen. It's worse than a Springlock, definitely. And it's 7, the Alvy machine. While working at a meat packing plant in Greeley, Colorado, a construction worker met a tragic end while installing an access catwalk. One of the larger machines at the plant, the Alvy, which was used to move boxed meat from a higher conveyor belt to a lower one, had not been properly turned off while the contractor was working. The heavy arm of the robot knocked him off his feet, and he then fell 10 feet onto a conveyor belt below, where his head was crushed by heavy machinery him instantly, yet again with the head crushing. Jeez. Or as the accident report so eloquently puts it, quote, "The Alvy machine was not de-energized nor locked out, and employee number 1 wore no fall protection. While employee number 1 was connecting the platform to the catwalk adjacent to, in, and around the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car of the Alvy machine, the car struck the construction worker. Employee number 1 fell approximately 10 feet, getting caught in the path of travel of the inserter and extruder car, and traveling under the car, which crushed employee number 1's head and killed him as the car reached its first resistance, that being the next angle iron joint of the car pathway." End quote. Gotta love the numbers. Jeez. And it's 6, mystery incident. Alright, so this one's actually FNAF. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This one comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures. Some interpreted this as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms within the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or multiple suits failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the 2 animatronics that have Springlock versions. However, there are multiple holes to this theory. Mostly the design of the shadow animatronics is not like the Springlock suits. Shadow Bonnie is very much modeled after Toy Bonnie, and Freddy is more like the Freddy or Golden Freddy from FNAF 1 and not like the Fredbear we see in FNAF 4. There are also people that say if this happened, then the robots would have been decommissioned, but as we've seen from this list and the last part, that wouldn't necessarily happen. And also, if you like what we're doing here, then firstly, seek help, but also, be sure you hit like and subscribe, because I yell about various video game series all the time, and yes, it is various ones now, we're not just doing FNAF, I promise. And at 4, Volkswagen. A contractor at another Volkswagen production plant in Germany also died as a result of an incident involving a robot, according to the automaker. The incident occurred on a Monday at the plant in Bonneville, located 100 kilometers north of Frankfurt. The victim, a 22-year-old man, was part of a team that was setting up a stationary robot, and it grabbed and crushed him against a metal plate. According to Volkswagen spokesperson Heiko Hillwing, initial conclusions indicated that it was a human error that caused the incident, again, rather than a problem with the robot itself, but the robot, which can be programmed to perform various tasks in the assembly process, normally operates within a confined area at the plant, handling auto parts and manipulating them as well. Other people were there, but they weren't injured, so again, it's all up in the air. And at 3, Henry Emily. I get that Springlock failures suck, but even the good guys in this series are kinda trash. FNAF 6 was supposed to be the end of the Afton story. That's what Henry set out to do in that game. Make sure that nobody remembered what happened there despite the parents of the victims remembering and the various other news sources covering it. However, the dumbass figured that the first fire didn't work, so a second one is definitely going to. And the fact that he was so confident in this plan for whatever reason that he actually let himself die in the process to make sure that nobody remembered what happened is dumb. Like I said, dude, even if Henry and William and his kids are dead, the parents of the victims still know. And as we learned in Security Breach, there are other parents who remember too, citing the missing children from the Pizzaplex as happening again, which means they know it happened before. Maybe if Henry had some balls, William wouldn't have been able to possess Vanny and come back yet again to wreak even more havoc, or I don't know, maybe everything would have been fine. The Pizzaplex missing children are a direct result of Henry being worse than a Springlock failure, and you can't tell me any different. Springlock failures have only resulted in one canonical death in the series, or death, but Henry has resulted in a lot more. Penultimately, and number 2, being an Afton. Okay, look, Springlock failures are horrible. Okay, yes, and yes, William is a horrible person, but being just an Afton in this universe must be the worst thing ever. It's like the worst spawn point in existence, because every Afton has been subjected to a horrible fate. It's like if Sean Bean is cast to play a character, you know that they're going to die. It's that, but if you're an Afton, you're going to suffer a horrible fate. Okay, let's go through the list, shall we? Here we go. William, springlocked, possessed, forced to suffer for like 60 years at least. Charlotte, grabbed by baby, going on to possess the animatronic, then joins a group of other animatronics that crawl inside of her big brother to escape an underground facility, and then gets kicked out of the greater collective, and then goes on to try to impress her father that caused her death in the first place by creating the robot that killed her. Talk about daddy issues. Then we have Crying Child, who we don't even know this kid's name. He watched his sister get crushed, he got crushed by a robot, and then he goes on to possess his brother and makes him suffer before realizing that it's not his fault. Then, speaking of the brother Michael, he blamed himself for killing his brother. He then spent his whole life trying to undo his father's horrible acts, and he himself was scooped in stuff full of robot parts, including his sister, which is again a whole other issue. He was made into a purple bruised man that everyone was scared of, and he was finally burnt to death in FNAF 6 by Henry without even being given the option to survive. So yeah, being an Afton is cursed. And that's not even talking about how Gregory or Vanessa could be Aftons. And finally, in at number 1, the lore! Oh, the worst thing about FNAF is the lore. Yeah, having to try to figure it out or even think about it or try to give it any coherent links is probably the most horrific thing that you can try to attempt in regards to the series, yes, but also literally at all. Do not try this, please. I get messages on Instagram saying like, oh, I have a FNAF theory and I was hoping we could talk about it. Like, I appreciate that you want to talk to me about it as opposed to like Matt Pat or someone famous, maybe because I'm more likely to reply because I'm not famous. But like, the best advice that I can give to you is if you value any shred of your sanity, do not try this. Do not attempt to put any shred of logic into FNAF. It will break you. Hey, do you think that I wanted to do this? Do you think that I planned on doing this for 2 years? No! I read one comment that said I see a FNAF in the thumbnail and I click, and it drove me so far into the madness that I'm basically the Joker of the FNAF community. People don't like me because I made a joke video about the worst FNAF fan games that included games that people loved, and now it's on the goddamn YouTuber wiki as a controversy. People get mad at you for misgendering fictional robots. They're robots and not real. People were furious with the Pop Goes creator because of that, and I'm like, what? Dude, just don't do it, okay? I'm not gatekeeping. I'm genuinely trying to help you. I want you to be okay, so please save yourself from the toxicity and let my heart and soul be the one to suffer all of this torture. And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that animatronic Josh should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly, holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life, and I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 8, The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored ignored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, cause you know that's kinda serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pull around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No.
Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the Springlocks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life, because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the Springlocks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arena's jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the Springlocks back up enough, you will trigger the Springlocks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those Springlocks. Yikes. Number 5. The fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible Springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's Springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a Springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another, the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that Springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the Springlocks failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the Springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the Springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the Springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits? Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC.
Halfway through into number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying.
Number 4. Bite of 83. We know that Fredbear was the one behind the Bite of 83 based on the minigames we see in FNAF 4. before, and we also know that CC was the victim of said bite and eventually died of his injuries. But what we don't know is why the bite happened. However, if you look deep into the lore surrounding Springlocks, it feels like a no-brainer here. Sorry, no pun intended, crying child. Sorry about that. We already know that Springlock failures have pretty much been an ongoing problem since the creation of the suits, and we also know that Springlock failures on a massive scale eventually got these kinds of suits retired. So what if the bite of 83 was the major beginning of that? What if the bite happened because of a Springlock failure itself? All the clues seem to be pointing us in this direction. A technical issue is the only real explanation, as the animatronics themselves seem to have not been inherently malicious, not until they were bonded with spirits which lingered inside them, making them vengeful. And so if there wasn't a spirit in there, then we must assume there was a technical error, a Springlock malfunction.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color's different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get springlocked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed, but no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility.
Number 2, Springlock suits were designed to malfunction. You have to wonder, when you learn how easy it is for a suit to malfunction, if the suits themselves were ever actually made with the intention of functioning in a safe manner. It seems more likely that they were made with the intention to do harm. The Springlocks can malfunction if not wound up securely and properly before the wearer dons the suit. Not winding up the springs properly can result in them simply going back to their original position, impaling the wearer. The thing that I find very suspicious is how a small amount of moisture, such as that which comes from heavy breathing or even just moisture in the air, can cause the Springlocks to completely loosen. These are also suits that you'd think were intended for you to move around in, acting as the character you were dressed up as, and yet in Sister Location we are warned not to move too much, as this can actually set off the Springlocks, implying either the locks were not at all secure when the suit was put on us, or that they are so temperamental that basic movements could set them off, never mind jumping around, dancing, or in general performing as the character that you happen to be dressed as, which is what I'd assume would be expected normally of an employee donning a mascot suit. Number 1. Henry sabotaged the Springlock suits. We don't really have a lot of clearly defined lore from the games that lets us know who really made all of the animatronics between William and his business partner Henry. In some continuities, it's implied that William is more the inventive one, whereas in others, William is more business savvy and Henry is more robotic savvy. It could be possible that the two were actually a little bit of both. I think that makes the most sense just based on everything we've learned about them. If this is the case, who's to say that Henry wasn't the one behind the Springlocks, and perhaps after losing his daughter, sabotaged said Springlock suits while in a vengeful state. When William, however, did not die from Springlocks impaling him, Henry had to resort to other means later down the road, like what we see in Pizzeria Simulator, with him rounding up all of the former animatronics and then burning the place to the ground. Or potentially with Henry being behind the burning down of Fazbear Fright, which also was a suspicious thing that happened, and we don't really know who's behind it, but I feel like Henry could make sense there. Number 10. William Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to Springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these Springlocks. He was fully impaled by the Springlocks in the Springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the Spring Body suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor which, when he touched, caused the Springlocks in the suit to loosen, or water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the Springlocks to malfunction, they fully released and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It'd only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love FNAF 2, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Can you springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the springlocks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly, after he seemed to have been springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost. Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant, than his video game counterpart. At least when it comes to dodging springlocks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting springlocked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the springlocks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's: The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found at the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the fourth closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being springlocked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence.
In at 7, WWWAD. Ah, yes. What would William Afton do? Because honestly, being him would suck worse than a springlock failure. I mean, like, I rip on Elizabeth all the time for wanting to impress her father in FNAF 6 like I was just doing, but I'm right to, okay? This man is an absolute psycho and not even a smart one. I have made so many videos about how dumb William is. Like, what if William Afton was smart? Top 10 William Afton dumbest moments. William Afton's luckiest moments. And that last one was just me ripping on him again because somehow, despite being this stupid and insane, he managed to not get caught. Every single time I talk about how stupid he is, I talk about how he could have done it better, which is why in various videos I will say hi to the jury, because I know for a fact that if anything ever happens in this area, they're coming to me first because I know how to be a psycho. But still, come on, that's it. That's the number, okay? Being springlocked would suck, but William Afton sucks harder. Wait, no, that sounds like, no, wait, no, don't cut me off. I didn't mean it's 6 doors. You knew that this was going to be on the list, okay? If you've been on this channel at all, you know that I hate the goddamn mother-loving doors in this game. Why do they open when the power is out? That doesn't make sense, okay? If it's an electromagnet, like everyone keeps saying in the comments whenever I bring this up, those require power to turn on. So if anything, it would be costing them power to keep the doors open rather than keep them closed. Gravity does not work in reverse. If the magnet is off when the door is up, it would just fall down. I get that it's supposed to be for gameplay purposes, okay, but what in-universe thing makes this make sense? People say that it's like a safety issue, so like if there's a fire or whatever, you can leave, but that's what windows are for. I am almost positive that there should be a window in that room, and if there's not, that's yet another OSHA violation that they need to address, okay? There's no conceivable way in any reality that the doors should work that way, but they do, and it makes me mad. Like, why would you do this, okay, Scott? Why? Sky Daddy Scott, I'm bringing it back. Why? Some people, like I said, say it's a fire safety thing, but like, No, if the building runs out of power, how could the doors open? Electromagnets use power to be on. So like even if it is a fire thing, how are they keeping them up? I don't get it. Also, if you made it through this far, subscribe. You clearly enjoy the video, or just me going insane. And there's plenty more of that on this channel, no matter which one you liked, so you're welcome. Halfway through into number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So, if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that.
Number 10. Springlock doors. Something that has come up multiple times over the course of all of these games, a question that still has yet to be answered, is how do the doors open if the power turns off, considering that they're mechanical doors? Well, what if the doors are actually spring-loaded and it's the power that holds them in place, and then when they turn off, they just snap upwards, I guess. The other strange thing in general about the doors is that they slide upwards, not sideways. That just means those straight looking sheets of metal are actually able to curl up somehow, being stored in the ceiling, like a garage door, although I don't think that's what's happening, or that there is a wall directly above for that door to slide into, which would be a lot of convenient wall stacking, especially if this is a one-level building, then it really doesn't make sense. Either way, I can only imagine that these doors would even be capable of springing open if it was the power alone keeping them shut, and that they are somehow spring-loaded to always be open, unless the power is on to push them down. That's the only way we can rationalize the way they work. Maybe this is also why our power runs out so fast as well. After all, I'm assuming it would take quite a bit of force and therefore power to keep them in place if they were spring-loaded. Number 9. Kelsey is Andrew. Kelsey is the new kid in one of the stories from Fazbear Frights number 3, 1:35 AM. Coincidentally, I think one of my favorite books in the Fazbear Frights series. The story itself is also titled appropriately The New Kid. It centers around Kelsey, who is a new kid at school that everyone likes because he is so friendly and good looking. In the end, Kelsey ends up being betrayed by his new friends that he's made, who try to scare him by taking him to an abandoned Freddy's location and making him dance around in a Springlock golden Freddy suit, which of course malfunctions, killing him. Later on, one of the friends comes back for Kelsey only to get stuck in the suit himself and see a corpse inside that doesn't seem to match Kelsey's appearance. This corpse is noted as having black curly hair, which led many fans of the books to speculate that Kelsey is in fact the vengeful spirit Andrew, who also appears in another story later on in the book series, The Man in Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book. In that story, the vengeful spirit, whom many believe to be Andrew, one of the spirits that possesses the Stitch Wraith, appears as a dark boy with curly hair wearing an alligator mask. With a description of his hair matching that of the corpse found inside the Springlock golden Freddy suit, it's easy to see why people think Kelsey is Andrew. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about all of the Springlocks, so many Springlock things, so springy, so locky, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Plush Trap is from Sister Location. And what's more, might also be an older model Springlock suit? Based on what Circus Baby says about the Springlock suit we are stuck in coming from her old location, we could theorize that Plush Trap is also a Sister Location Springlock suit, especially since Plush Trap looks much older by comparison. But why do we think Plush Trap is also a Springlock suit? Well, it's interesting that in the book Fetch, we learn more about the Plush Trap animatronic, where it is implied that it can mimic the voices of other folks, something that prior to Fetch's release, only Sister Location animatronics seem to be capable of. This is what makes us think that Plush Trap comes from Sister Location and perhaps was an older animatronic brought over from Circus Baby's previous location. While Plush Trap doesn't really fit in with the overall aesthetic of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, we do know that an older Springlock suit was also kept there. Does that mean that Plush Trap is also an old Springlock that initially was its sister location, just based on the voice mimicking? If so, how did they get to be with the Nightmare animatronics? And also, who wore the Plush Trap suits if they were ever worn, if they were Springlocks in that way? Was it designed for a shorter employee or possibly for kids to wear? Also, just to be clear, I'm not implying that that is the Springlock suit that we are in Sister Location when you're playing the game, because yeah. I don't know how tall Michael Afton is, but I don't think he's as small as Plush Trap.
And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear.
Number 6. Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. I think I said that all right. This theory, I believe, has been debunked, so just a word to the wise about that, but I still thought it was a pretty cool theory that existed, and I personally like the sound of it. I think it's a neat theory, hence why I'm gonna share it here with you, even though it's been discredited. But just know, we know that. The theory posits that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie were both victims of a Springlock failure. Phone Guy talks about the sister location experiencing multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, leading some fans to think that might explain the shadow animatronics we see and what exactly they are. Spirits who are attached to the suits that they died in, but were for some reason unable to fully possess them, instead becoming a shadow-like version of that animatronic. I just think it's a cool idea. I mean, shadow animatronics are so mysterious to me, so when I find cool stories that could explain how they work, their theories, I love them.
How about doing number 5, being a cop? Being a cop in the FNAF universe must be a horrible idea, because not only are you now a cop, but you're also a cop in the FNAF universe, which for the sake of this list is working at the precinct that failed to capture William Afton, okay? So now the public ridicules you, they don't think you can actually do your job, and you probably got your budget cut so badly that you're maybe able to get one squad car, but that's it. One squad car for the whole station. Plus, now you gotta deal with multiple arson cases, and the fact that Freddy's keeps coming back and more kids keep going missing. I don't know. There's a weird purple guy walking around that smells bad, but it's like also like a skin condition, so you can't really say anything about it without absolutely destroying the slightest bit of reputation that you have left as an officer in this universe. Like, that's in essence what it's like to be a cop in FNAF. Okay, or what it would realistically be like. Because honestly, these dudes didn't check inside the bleeding, death-smelling animatronics when kids went missing in that building. So, I get it. They're either ridiculed by the public, or you just lose the majority of your IQ once you join up with them. Those are the only two explanations. It could be both as well. And at 4, MCI. The missing children's incident is definitely worse than a Springlock failure. I mean, the one failure that we know about that happened in the games only affected one person, and a horrible person at that. So I mean, just by sheer numbers alone, the missing children's incident is definitely worse. But not even just that, okay? Those parents must have been in a rough spot. Not only did they lose their kids, but they also have to deal with the incompetence of the in-universe police and the whole plot requirement of Afton getting away with it to actually continue the series. So yeah, like I said, there were literally animatronics leaking mucus and blood that people were comparing to human corpses, and they weren't actually investigated. So, do you know how insanely infuriating that would be? Okay, I'm surprised that Henry was the one to put Afton down and not someone else. Like, yeah, he got springlocked in '93, but that was 7 years after the missing children's incident. Had I been one of those parents, I would not have cared about the prison sentence, okay? And I don't think that anyone would have really judged me for it. I think that they would have thanked me and posted my bail. I mean, I would have lost the trial, but still. Hi, jury.
Number 3, Payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a Springlock failure from the inside, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the bite of '83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a Springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, Devin also likely died.
And a 10, unnamed man. In 2015, there was a tragic incident at a Volkswagen plant in Germany in which a man was killed by a robot. The victim was part of a team that was setting up the robot, which was responsible for picking up components and assembling them into car parts. The robot was normally kept in a cage, and it was while the man was working on it inside the cage, and that's when the incident occurred. According to reports, the robot grabbed the man and pinned him against some metal sheets, causing serious injuries. The man later died as a result of those injuries. In a statement, Volkswagen said that they believe the incident was caused by human error, and it's worth noting that another worker who was inside the cage with the victim at the time was not harmed, but they weren't really sure. Or at least, of course, they're gonna say it was human error. And at 9, Wanda Holbrook. In March 2015, a robot at the Ventra Iona Mains plant in Michigan caused the death that of Wanda Holbrook, a 57-year-old maintenance specialist who worked at the plant. The plant, which produced car parts, was divided into sections, with robots from one section supposedly unable to enter another. However, one robot did cross into a section where Wanda was working and picked up a trailer part, which it then dropped on her head, killing her instantly. The robot was attempting to load the trailer part onto a fixture that had already contained another trailer part, which should have been impossible, due to the fact that a fixture can only hold one trailer part at any given time. Wanda's husband William filed charges against the 5 companies involved in the production of the robot, and I'm pretty sure he won. But skull crushing, come on, that's too close. In Oregon. In 2007, 9 South African soldiers were killed and 14 were injured when an anti-aircraft weapon, the Oerlikon GDF-005, malfunctioned during a training exercise at the Army's Combat Training Center in Northern Cape. The weapon, which is capable of firing, targeting, and engaging hostiles without human intervention, and can even reload automatically, jammed and exploded before firing 250 rounds of high explosive 33mm rounds from its 2 barrels at the soldiers. It's believed that the accident may have been caused by either a software or mechanical failure, and according to Richard Young, CEO of a defense company, this type of malfunction is not uncommon, and he has witnessed similar incidents with automatic anti-aircraft weapons in the past. But fortunately, no one was killed in those instances. But if that's an issue, and not an uncommon one, maybe you should fix it. And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Night's 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the 2nd generation of Fredbear. Getting close to the end of number 3, Sodesia Sterling Heights. On December 15th, 2012, an employee at Sodesia Sterling Heights, a US company that manufactures car parts, was killed while working inside a robot work cell. The 38-year-old male employee was inside the cell when the gates closed and he was struck from behind by a transfer robot, which crushed his chest and back. The company, which specializes in producing heavier car parts such as chassis components, used powerful robot arms to lift and maneuver these parts around the plant. In this incident, the machine should have been powered down, but it moved unexpectedly and pinned the worker against the wire of the cage, causing the fatal injuries, which is unfortunate and really makes me question why we use robots at all. But ultimately, in number 2, robot surgeons. Robot-assisted surgery is a form of minimally invasive surgery that allows surgeons to perform complex procedures through small incisions or remotely using a computer console. I had one of these used on me when I was getting my appendix out. These robots have been hailed as a major advancement in 21st century medicine because they offer increased precision and control for the surgeon, which can lead to improved patient outcomes. However, it is important to note that like any medical procedure, robot-assisted surgery carries some risks. A study in the United States found that surgical robots may be linked to the deaths of 144 people between 2008 and 2013. The causes of these deaths varied, but included system errors that caused delays in the procedure and instances of machinery falling into patients' open wounds. Despite these risks, robot-assisted surgery is still widely used in the medical field because it offers many potential benefits to both patients and surgeons. For example, it can allow for less trauma to the patient during the surgery, faster recovery times, and less scarring. But overall, the use of surgical robots in the medical field is a complex issue that requires careful consideration for both the surgeon and the patient for, risks and benefits. And either way, it's up to you. And finally, in at number 1, Regina Elsa. In June 2016, 20-year-old Regina Elsa was killed in a robot-related accident just 2 weeks before her wedding. The incident occurred at Asian USA, a South Korean-owned plant in Cusseta, Alabama that produced parts for Hyundai and Kia vehicles. On the day of the accident, Elsa and some co-workers were attempting to repair a faulty faulty robot, despite the fact that they weren't supposed to do so. They had tried to reach the maintenance department, but no one answered their calls, so they decided to fix the robot themselves, probably out of fear that they would get in trouble if the robot wasn't working. Unfortunately, the robot suddenly restarted and pushed Elsa against another machine, causing serious injuries. She was taken to the East Alabama Medical Center and airlifted to UAB Hospital, but she died the following morning. An investigation into the incident revealed that Agent USA had committed several safety violations in order to maximize profits, and in fact, the US Department of Labor had fined the company and two staffing agencies $2.7 million for 27 safety violations just 2 weeks before this incident. The inquiry also found that Agent USA overworked its employees and encouraged them to repair the faulty machines, which explains why they were doing it.